She was dragged before the Galactic King, her wrists bound and her steps heavy as the soldiers pushed her forward through the long corridors of the palace. Her body trembled, but not with fear, rather with the weight of exhaustion and defiance. The walls around her were alive with strange symbols, glowing faintly like whispers of an ancient power, and the air itself seemed to hum with menace. Every sound, every echo reminded her that she was not of this world. She was a human taken from her home, from her people, torn away under the shadow of alien ships that had blackened the skies. She remembered the day they came, the day her village burned in fire that did not belong to the earth, and she remembered the cruel voice that declared her a prize for the king, a prize that would amuse him, and perhaps reveal a power she did not even know she had. The throne room was vast, like the heart of a dying star, filled with endless pillars of stone and metal that twisted together into shapes no human mind could easily understand. She felt small as she was forced to her knees, the sound of the chains echoing across the floor. The guards stood tall with eyes hidden behind their masks, but even without seeing their faces, she felt the emptiness inside them. They were not men as she knew them. They were creatures bound in loyalty to the will of one ruler, and that ruler sat high upon his throne, the Galactic King. His figure was draped in a cloak of shadows. His crown burned with a light so sharp it almost cut her vision. His eyes glowed with a cruel brilliance, and when he leaned forward, the room itself seemed to bend to his will. The girl did not lower her gaze. She refused to look at the ground. Her eyes met his, even though she knew such defiance was dangerous. His laughter filled the chamber, cold and hollow like metal breaking against stone. He said that no human had ever stood before him without trembling, that no human could endure the fate he had prepared for her. She felt her heart race, but she would not allow her fear to show. Her voice, steady, though weak from the long journey, told him that she would not break and that his empire would one day fall. His smile widened, not in anger but in twisted delight, as though her defiance was a spark he wished to crush beneath his heel. The king rose from his throne. His steps thundered across the hall, each movement sending ripples of energy through the ground. She could feel the power radiating from him like a storm that never ended. He towered above her and reached down his hand, cold and heavy, lifting her chin so her face tilted up to meet his gaze. He studied her as if she were both an insect and a mystery, one he could crush, yet one he dared not fully understand. He told her that her spirit would entertain him for a while, but in the end her body would betray her, and her hope would die, just as her people had died under his fire. She clenched her fists even as the guards tightened their grip on her shoulders. She whispered that she would never give him the satisfaction of surrender, and in that moment, though her body was weak, her spirit burned like a flame, refusing to be snuffed out in the darkness of his throne room. The Galactic King believed she carried something within her that no other human possessed, a hidden spark, a secret power that could threaten the foundation of his empire. He had seen visions in the stars, whispers carved in fire that spoke of a human who would rise against him, and though he laughed at such prophecies, he could not ignore them. He thought this girl was the one. He thought she was the danger he feared, and so he ordered her torment, not only to break her body, but to search her soul for the truth that might lie hidden inside. The guards dragged her deeper into the chamber, where machines of iron and crystal waited. Their surfaces shimmered with strange energy, pulsing like veins alive with cruel purpose. The air smelled of smoke and lightning, and the hum of the devices pressed against her ears like the roar of 1,000 storms. She was forced onto a slab, cold as ice, with bindings that locked her wrists and ankles. Every movement she made caused the chains to tighten, and every breath reminded her that she was trapped beneath the will of a king who ruled galaxies through fear. The king stood above her, commanding his soldiers to activate the machines. Their hands moved with precision, pressing runes and levers that sent arcs of light crawling across her skin. The first wave of energy pierced her like a blade, sharp and merciless, but she did not cry out. She bit down against the pain, her teeth grinding, her lips pressed tight. She would not give him the sound he wanted. His laughter echoed in the chamber again, deep and cruel. He told her that her silence meant nothing, that sooner or later her screams would fill the palace and remind every world that resistance was futile. The pain grew stronger. With each pulse, the machines tore at her nerves, at her very essence. It felt as if her blood had turned to fire, her bones to glass. Her breath came short, her vision blurred, yet even as the torment raged through her, she clung to memories of home. She remembered the sound of her mother's voice, the laughter of children running through fields, the warmth of the sun against her face. She clung to those moments like lifelines holding her soul above the darkness that threatened to swallow it. Guards watched in silence, their eyes hidden, yet she could feel their unease, for never before had a human endured so long. Under the king's punishment, most broke within moments, their cries echoing until silence claimed them. Yet this girl refused to yield. She would not let her voice betray her spirit. Her defiance grew stronger with every surge of pain, until even the machines seemed confused by her resilience. The Galactic King studied her with fascination, his cruel smile fading into a frown of curiosity. He wondered if the prophecy was true, if she indeed carried the spark that could undo his reign, but pride would not let him admit such fear. He leaned closer, his shadow falling over her, as he declared that he would tear the secret from her, even if it took her last breath, even if he had to break her 1,000 times until nothing remained. He promised her body would betray her, her spirit would wither, and her hope would crumble, just as every world that stood against him had fallen. Yet as she looked into his burning eyes, she did not see invincibility. She saw doubt buried deep beneath the layers of arrogance and cruelty, and in that moment, even as agony coursed through her veins, she realized that he feared her more than she feared him, and that thought gave her strength enough to endure another moment, another breath, another strike of pain. Day after day the torture continued, and though her body weakened, her spirit refused to surrender. The machines wrapped her in agony, their light burning into her skin, as though trying to carve away her very soul. The guards watched as time stretched into endless cycles of torment, their masked faces betraying nothing, yet she could feel the unease growing within them, for this girl did not break like the others. She endured in silence, her jaw clenched, her breath ragged, but never once did she give the king the screams he craved. The Galactic King grew restless, his laughter turning to irritation as he demanded more power, more intensity. He ordered the machines to rise to levels that even his own kind would fear, and yet the girl remained alive, her body shaking, her veins glowing with the strange energy that coursed through her. Every surge meant to destroy her, instead revealed a resilience that unsettled him. He wondered if she truly carried the prophecy within her, if fate itself had chosen her to stand against him. She clung to fragments of memory. To survive, she thought of her village before the sky was filled with ships. She thought of the river that sparkled in the sun, and the voices of those she loved. Those memories were her shield against the endless waves of torment. Each vision of home reminded her why she could not give in. Her people had been slaughtered, her world left in ashes. If she yielded, then everything they suffered would be for nothing. So she endured, though every nerve in her body cried out for release. The king leaned close, his shadow swallowing her as he taunted her, telling her that her silence meant nothing, that her defiance was only fuel for his amusement. He promised that every second she resisted only prolonged her agony, that she was no hero, only a fragile human who would be forgotten. Yet when their eyes locked, she saw not only cruelty in him, but also the faint trace of fear. He masked it with arrogance, yet it was there like a hidden wound, and that knowledge gave her strength. The guards exchanged uneasy glances, though none spoke aloud. They had never seen a human last so long. They had never seen one resist the will of the Galactic King. Whispers grew among them that perhaps this girl was different, perhaps she was dangerous, and the king noticed their doubts, which only deepened his rage. He ordered the machines to tear deeper into her, to strip her down to the very essence of her being. He wanted to expose the secret that kept her alive, to shatter at once and for all. Her body convulsed, her muscles trembling, her heart pounding like a drum against her chest. Sweat and blood marked her skin, and still she refused to yield. Every surge of agony threatened to pull her into darkness, yet every heartbeat dragged her back into the light. She whispered silently to herself that she would not fall, that even if death came, she would not give him the victory of her surrender. At last she felt her strength falter, the edges of her vision dimmed, and the sound of the machines blurred into a distant roar. Her breath slowed, her body grew heavy, like stone. She knew the end was near, yet even as the darkness closed around her, she felt no regret. She had endured longer than anyone expected. She had shown him that he could not easily crush her spirit, and in that final moment, as her heart stuttered, she thought not of the pain but of the hope that one day someone would rise to end his reign. At last the torment reached its final peak. The machines screamed with power, and the air trembled as though the very walls of the throne room would collapse. The girl lay bound against a cold slab, her body convulsing as wave after wave of energy tore through her veins. She had endured longer than any before her, longer than the king expected, longer than the guards could believe, but even the strongest flame can be smothered when starved of air, and so her strength began to fade. Her breaths came shallow, her chest rising only with effort, her vision dimming into shadows that danced at the edges of her mind. The Galactic King stood over her, his towering form casting a shadow that seemed to stretch across the universe itself. He watched her falter, his glowing eyes narrowing in satisfaction. He declared that her defiance was meaningless, that even the strongest will could not stand against his power. He raised his hand, and with a single command, the machines released one last surge, a storm of agony that shattered her body like glass and dragged her into silence. Her head fell to the side, her hair damp with sweat, her lips parted slightly, but no sound escaped. The machines stilled their hum, fading into quiet. The guards stepped forward at the king's order, unlocking the bindings from her wrists and ankles. Her body slid limp to the floor like a doll discarded. Her chest did not rise, her pulse could not be found. She was gone. The guards lifted her and carried her away through the vast corridors, their boots echoing against stone, the silence between them heavy, though none dared speak aloud. They knew what they had witnessed. The girl who defied the king had finally fallen. Her spirit crushed, her body broken. It was the fate of all who stood against him, and yet in the stillness of their march, there was something unspoken, a tension that none could voice. The king returned to his throne, his cloak sweeping across the floor, his eyes glowing brighter with triumph. He spoke to the hall, declaring that this was the destiny of all who resisted him. He said her courage had been an illusion, her strength a fleeting ember that had burned out before it could spark rebellion. The guards bowed in silence, though deep within, some of them felt a weight in their chest that no command could erase. The throne room dimmed as the torches flickered, the silence wrapping around the hall like a shroud outside. The stars burned cold and distant, indifferent to the death that had just unfolded. Yet somewhere in that silence a whisper lingered, like an echo refusing to fade. Her body was placed in a chamber where the dead were kept, the door sealed, the air still, her skin pale, her eyes closed, her lips frozen in silence. She looked gone, utterly gone, but even as the darkness surrounded her there was something waiting, something unseen that the king did not sense, a force lingering within her, like a seed buried deep in the soil waiting for its moment to rise. For now, the Galactic King believed his victory complete. He believed the prophecy ended before it began. He believed the girl broken and erased. Yet the universe has ways of defying the will of tyrants, and in the quiet of that chamber the story was not over. It was only beginning. The guards carried her lifeless body down the endless corridors of the palace, their steps heavy, and their voices silent. They had seen many prisoners fall before they had seen rebels broken and warriors crushed, but this girl was different. She had lasted longer than anyone had imagined. She had defied the will of the Galactic King for days, and though her body now hung limp in their arms, her head tilted lifeless, her lips pale, there was a weight in the air that none of them could explain. They placed her in the chamber of the dead, a room carved of black stone colder than the void of space itself. The walls glimmered faintly with symbols etched in fire, a language older than their empire. The chamber was meant to contain bodies, until they were discarded into the abyss beyond the stars. The guards laid her gently on the slab, though their orders had been clear, though their loyalty belonged to the king. A strange unease touched their movements. One guard whispered that she had been different, another said her silence haunted him, and a third reminded them that the king allowed no doubts, no hesitation. The door was sealed, the chamber left in stillness. Outside in the throne room the Galactic King raised his hand before his court, and declared his triumph. He told them that the prophecy of a human rising against him was a lie, that the girl had been nothing more than a fragile creature who believed her spirit mattered. He reminded them that he had crushed her will and ended her life. He demanded that his guards spread the story across the stars, that all who heard of her death would know resistance was hopeless. Whispers began to drift through the palace, through the halls and barracks and markets. Every soldier, every servant spoke in quiet tones about the human girl. Some said she had endured pain greater than any creature should survive. Some said she had looked into the eyes of the king and not bowed her head, and some said she had died with her spirit unbroken. The stories grew, with each retelling carrying a spark of doubt that no proclamation from the throne could erase. 17 minutes passed. In the shadow of the palace, time, moving with the slow weight of silence, the guards who had carried her body could not shake the image of her defiance, her face refusing to surrender, even in her final breath. One of them lingered outside the chamber, his hand brushing against the cold surface of the door, as though expecting something, though he could not say what. The Galactic King sat high upon his throne, his eyes burning with cruel light, yet behind them a shadow stirred not of victory, but of unease. He had destroyed countless lives, countless worlds, and yet something about this girl clung to him. Her silence, her eyes, her defiance, it lingered in his mind like a wound that refused to close. The palace continued its rhythm: soldiers, marching citizens, bowing servants, obeying, and still beneath the surface, whispers grew like cracks in stone. No one dared speak aloud, yet all felt the same weight. The girl was gone, and yet somehow her story did not feel finished. It felt as though something unseen waited in the silence of that sealed chamber, as though the universe itself held its breath. 17 minutes had passed in silence within the chamber of the dead. Her body lay motionless on the slab, her skin pale, her lips cold, her chest still. The guards who had carried her there remained outside, their minds uneasy, their thoughts circling the memory of her defiance. They told themselves she was gone, that no one returned from such torment, and yet none could shake the feeling that something lingered within those walls. The air in the chamber shifted, a faint vibration crawling across the stone, as though the room itself had begun to breathe. Light from the strange runes carved into the walls flickered faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. Though no hand touched them, the slab beneath her body trembled almost imperceptibly, and then her fingers twitched, a subtle movement small enough to be overlooked, but it was the spark of something impossible. Her chest rose shallow at first, then fell silent, then rose again, as if her body was remembering how to live. Her eyes snapped open, glowing with a strange light unlike any she had known before, not the soft color of human eyes, but something radiant, a brilliance drawn from beyond life itself. She gasped the breath that echoed like thunder in the still chamber, her lungs burning, as though she had swallowed fire, her veins alight with energy. The runes on the walls flared brighter, in answer, as if the chamber itself recognized her return. The glow danced across her skin, wrapping her in strange patterns. Her wounds vanished, closing without scar. Her strength surged through every muscle. Though she had died moments ago, she now rose stronger than she had ever been. Her feet touched the ground, her balance steady, her gaze filled not with fear but with power. Outside, the guard stiffened. One of them heard the sound like a gasp carried through the heavy door. His eyes widened, though he told himself it was only his imagination. But then a second sound followed, a low hum, a vibration in the air that set his bones on edge. He turned to his companions, his voice low, as he asked if they heard it too. They nodded in silence, their fear growing like a storm within the chamber. She stood tall, her body bathed in light, her heart beating strong, her breath steady, her mind clear. She felt no pain, no weakness, only clarity. Her memories returned sharper than before, the face of her family, the cries of her people, the fire that destroyed her village. All of it burned within her like fuel for the strength that now through her. She did not know how she had returned. She only knew that death had not claimed her, and that something greater than the king had chosen her for this moment. She walked toward the sealed door, each step heavy with purpose, her bare feet pressing against the cold stone, her shadow long behind her, the glow from her eyes cutting through the darkness. She raised her hand, pressing it against the door, and the runes flared once more. The chamber shook with power, and the guards outside stumbled back in shock as the surface began to crack. They had seen her lifeless body, they had carried her to this place. They had sworn she was gone, and yet now they felt her presence alive, and stronger than before. Terror clawed at their chests, for they knew what the king had declared final was no longer true, and if death itself could not hold her, then perhaps neither could the empire of the Galactic King. The guards stumbled back as the door of the chamber cracked with light. The stone groaned as if resisting a force far beyond its design. One guard whispered that it was impossible, his voice trembling through the mask. Another clutched his weapon, though his hands shook with fear. They had carried her body lifeless. They had seen her chest still, her eyes closed, her skin pale. They knew she had died. Yet now something within that chamber was alive, and it filled the air with a power that made the walls tremble. The first fracture split across the surface, glowing like molten fire. The runes burned, brighter, pulsing in rhythm with a heartbeat that did not belong to the dead. The guards pressed themselves against the walls, their breaths shallow, as they realized that the sound was not only the chamber, it was her, the girl they had delivered to death. Her heart was beating stronger than any they had ever heard. The stone burst open in a flash of blinding light. The door shattered into fragments that scattered across the floor, and from the blaze of radiance, she stepped forward, her figure silhouetted against the glow, her body unbroken, her movements steady. Her eyes burning with a light that pierced through the darkness. She no longer looked like the fragile captive they had carried. She stood taller, her presence filling the corridor, her silence louder than any cry. Guards froze. None dared raise their weapons, for deep within they knew it would be useless. One of them whispered that she was chosen, another muttered that she was cursed, but all of them felt the same terror. Their legs trembled, their voices faltered, and then, as she took another step forward, they broke, scattering into the shadows of the corridor, their loyalty to the king collapsing under the weight of their fear. She watched them flee, her gaze calm, her breath steady, her heart filled not with hatred but with purpose. She did not need to chase them, for she knew fear would carry her story faster than any blade could. Her survival, her return, her glow of power would spread through the palace and beyond like fire leaping from branch to branch. Alone, in the corridor, she paused, the silence around her broken only by the faint hum of energy still flowing through her veins. She touched the wall, her fingers brushing against symbols carved into the stone, and they responded, flaring with light as though the palace itself acknowledged her presence. She could feel the weight of destiny pressing upon her, though she did not yet understand it. She knew she was no longer the same girl who had been dragged in chains before the throne. She had been remade by death and by whatever force had pulled her back. The guards who fled carried with them a terror they could not contain. Their voices shook as they told others what they had seen. Their words spread through soldiers and servants, through the very halls of the palace. The girl had returned, the human had defied death. The prophecy whispered in shadows was real, and no command from the Galactic King could silence the fear that now spread like wildfire. She continued walking, her steps slow yet unstoppable, her eyes fixed ahead toward the throne room where the king waited. She knew he believed her gone. She knew he had claimed victory. She would show him that death was not his weapon to wield, and that his reign built on fear would soon tremble before her. The throne room stood vast and silent, the torches burning low, their flames flickering against the endless pillars of stone and metal. The Galactic King sat upon his throne, his crown blazing, his eyes cold as he listened to the whispers of guards who returned, broken in voice and trembling in fear. They spoke of light bursting from the chamber. They spoke of the girl walking alive, her eyes glowing, her wounds gone. The king dismissed their words with a wave of his hand, yet within him a storm stirred. His pride refused to believe, yet his instincts whispered that something had defied him. The heavy doors creaked open, and the sound echoed through the hall. The soldiers standing in formation tensed their hands, gripping their weapons, though none dared move. And through the shadows she entered, her steps steady, her gaze locked upon the throne. Her body carried no scars, her chains were gone, her presence filled the air with weight heavier than any army. The silence deepened as the guards realized she had truly returned. The Galactic King leaned forward upon his throne, his eyes blazing with disbelief and fury. His voice thundered that she should not exist, that death had claimed her, that no creature could rise once it had fallen under his hand. Yet she did not answer. She simply walked across the floor, each step echoing like a drum, each heartbeat filling the chamber with unseen force. The guards shifted uneasily, some lowering their weapons, though no order had been given. Others stepped back, though their king remained before them. The sight of her unbroken, her silence unshaken, unnerved them more than any blade could. They remembered her screams that never came, her defiance that never cracked, and now they saw her alive, more powerful than before, and their courage faltered. She reached the center of the hall and stopped. Her eyes met his, her gaze steady, unflinching. She felt no fear. Her heart burned with the memory of her people, her family, her world destroyed under his command. She spoke at last, her voice clear, ringing through the vast hall. She told him that he had taken everything from her, that he had broken her body, that he had silenced her breath, and yet he had failed to break her soul. She declared that his empire built on fear would not last, and that his throne was not eternal. The king rose from his seat, his cloak swirling around him, his figure towering as he stepped down from the dais, each stride shaking the floor. He declared that her return was meaningless, that her spark would be extinguished again, and this time no power would raise her. He spread his arms, the energy of the throne room bending to his command, the torches flaring, the ground trembling as though the palace itself bowed to his rage. Yet she did not step back. She stood firm, the light in her eyes burning brighter with every word he spoke. Her silence was more powerful than his roar, her calm more unshakable than his fury. And in that moment the guards who watched felt something shift, the balance between fear and hope tilting as the girl who had died once now faced the king without trembling. The Galactic King stood before her, his form towering, his crown blazing with cruel light, his fury shaking the air as he declared that she would be crushed once more, and this time no miracle, no prophecy, no hidden power would return her. He raised his hands, and the chamber erupted with energy, the floor cracking, the torches flaring, the very pillars trembling as if the palace itself feared its master. The guards pressed back against the walls, their bodies frozen between loyalty and terror, their eyes locked on the girl who had already defied death. She did not move. She stood in the center of the storm, her gaze locked on him, her silence unbroken, her breath calmed, the light in her eyes burning brighter with every surge of his power. She felt the energy crash against her like waves against stone, yet she did not falter. She remembered the pain, she remembered the darkness, she remembered the silence of death, and she knew nothing he could summon would break her now, for she had walked through death and returned, and that made her stronger than him. The guards began to whisper, their voices hushed but spreading. One said she cannot be defeated, another said she is the prophecy, and a third whispered that the king himself feared her. The whispers grew until they filled the throne room like a current of wind carrying doubt and hope together. The king heard them, and his fury deepened. His pride would not allow this human, this fragile creature, to stand unshaken. Before him she lifted her hand, and for the first time, the energy he unleashed did not consume her. Instead, it bent around her as if the universe itself chose to protect her. Her body glowed brighter. The runes carved into the pillars flared in response. The throne room itself seemed to awaken to her presence. The guards shielded their eyes from the radiance, and in that moment, they no longer saw a prisoner. They saw a Milche spoke again, her voice steady and clear. She told him that his reign built on fear and cruelty would end, that no empire could stand forever against the will of those who refused to bow. She told him that he had taken her life, but in doing so had given her strength beyond his understanding. She declared that she was not alone, that every world he had broken, every soul he had crushed, now stood with her. The king roared and hurled his power at her in a storm of fire and shadow, yet she walked forward. Step by step, her body radiant, her spirit unyielding. The storm cracked and split against her like glass shattering against stone, until at last she stood only a breath away from him, her eyes meeting his, her silence louder than any scream. The guards knelt not to him but to her, their weapons falling to the ground, their loyalty broken, their fear replaced with hope. The king saw it in their eyes, and for the first time in his rule he felt the weight of defeat pressing against his chest, not from her hand, not from her blade, but from the spirit. He had failed to crush her story, spread beyond the palace, beyond the stars, carried by those who witnessed her rise. The tale of the girl who was tortured to death and returned, the tale of defiance, stronger than fear. It spread across worlds as a spark of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest empire, even under the shadow of the cruelest throne, there could still be light.